Anish, hi, good to have you with us. How have you been?
Absolutely fine. Good to see you. Glad we could connect. In spite of all these challenges that we've had around traveling and stuff like
No,
that.
but I think this is just so much more efficient, right? We don't have to wait for those, settings, right? And then trying to coordinate as much time. And I think just being here is so much more easier.
Absolutely. Whatever can get the conversation going, and we can learn from each other. I think that's that.
Awesome. Anish, this is going to be an exciting conversation. I'm particularly looking forward to it, right? I have been a firm believer that food, D2C, anything around human consumption, right? And especially in an environment, post COVID, I think it's going to make this entire ecosystem very, very exciting, right? I think we're going to have a very renewed consumerism, right, when it comes to the entire consumption setting, and especially food, right? Because our exposures are kind of changed. Uh, this has become so much more dynamic, right? And I think awareness levels have kind of changed, right? So we are now going to be dealing with a very different kind of a customer, and I think that with, of course, the possibility of Bharat, which is a completely untouched market, makes this conversation extremely interesting and exciting at the same time, right? With that, Anish, before we dive into the tag story, right? Why don't you give me a quick background, right? I mean, we've had the opportunity of knowing each other, but a quick background would be helpful.
So yeah, I think, and I'll possibly refer to the more exciting parts of my journey, and I will not allude to the first 10 years of my life, which I spent with boring large companies.
Right.
Fantastic brands, though, of course, and I learned a lot. These were brands like Coke and Nokia. Thanks to them, got fantastic global exposure across various leadership aspects of sales, marketing, and distribution. But more importantly, I think from a professional standpoint, always intensely proud of the fact that I'm a 2x entrepreneur now. Right. My first venture was something very exciting. This was a company called Shotang. This was India's first tech-enabled retail distribution platform. Right. Scaled that business to a Series B stage, exited that business in about 2017. Ran that company as co-founder, CEO, took it from, I think, 3 employees to about 486. 7-city presence. That was quite a roller coaster and a very, very interesting journey, of course. Right. Took a short break, wanted to kind of reinvigorate, also spend time on a lot of my personal passions. Right. Which include, climbing 6 Himalayan summits during those 18 months, right. Making time for fitness, for sports, the things that typically I never found time for, right? Right. First 5 years of being an entrepreneur. Came back into my second stint in an area where I felt most comfortable, where I felt I had core competence, which is consumer brands. Right. And, damn excited about being here without even realizing it. In fact, now that I'm speaking to you, I realize it's been 2 years already, right? And 2 years of, creating stuff, exciting products, building teams, taking it to market. More importantly, listening to consumer stories every day about how we are possibly making a small difference to their lives. So that's what makes it very exciting.
Very interesting. Anish, I remember our conversation, right, that we had. I think this was in a pre-COVID environment, right? I was, when we discussed about it, right, I think you were contemplating of this from a very, very early period, right? Even before it came together. And I could only imagine the challenges, right? I mean, given the kind of ecosystem that we operate in, where a large part of the market is essentially held by just one or few players, getting into a snack brand and getting into something to do around, potato chips of a different kind seemed to be an uphill task, right? And I'll be honest with you, and it seemed literally impossible. From that to here, it's been a phenomenal journey in that sense, right? You've been able to carve out a niche for yourself. The product is resonating fairly well. But what made you pick this up, right? I mean, I understand you've been a fitness enthusiast, right? There was a little bit of a sensitivity which came from that side. But what made you pick up an uphill battle, right? What made you do this?
So Ashu, 2 parts to it. Okay, I think number one, let me talk about the personal part.
Sure.
I think the personal story, and that is something more important, because that's what drives the passion around it.
Sure.
I think I discovered, a very active lifestyle only once I hit my 30s, right? Mm-hmm. I discovered fitness possibly much later in life, right? However, every time I traveled abroad, I could very clearly see that the younger generations out there, not just are very conscious about what they put inside their mouth, what they eat, sure. the labels that they consume, but they also have a very, very active lifestyle, right? Wanted to do my bit to be able to help an upcoming generation, eat fitter, give them options, with products which are fit and at the same time kind of really appeal to their taste buds.
Sure.
But more importantly, also play a role in helping them discover an active lifestyle, because I think these two things kind of go hand in hand. Fat diets don't work, right? I think that's something which all of us have realized over a period of time. So I think an active lifestyle is possibly the best motivation to eat fit. And when you want to eat fit, you need the right products, right? So, and I think India didn't have that. So that was possibly the personal motivation. But of course, you can't just walk into a business with personal motivation, right? You need to kind of research the space really well. And when I look at it very objectively, I think there are businesses to be built in white spaces, right? Where there is no competition and you possibly have a first mover advantage. But then that's not necessarily the only way of building a business, right? Because that inherently is also pronged with a lot of risks as well, because you might get your market timing off, you might be too ahead of the curve, ahead of the timing. We chose to get into a market which was a proven market, right? But a large market in itself. So the whole savory snacking market today is 85,000 crores in India alone. And we have global ambitions very clear. So what that means is that we chose to walk into a market which was an established market, a large market. And within that, we said we will carve out a niche for ourselves. We'll possibly speak to a consumer and specific consumer needs rather than trying to speak to everyone. And in that context, we said that we wanted to be this brand which is going to be not just uber premium, is also going to have a brand personality which is very urban, Gen Z, right? Focus on doing products that are innovative, and that means actually innovating on food technology, investing significant dollars in coming up with new products, focusing on taste, and at the same time solve for the whole better for you aspect as well. And possibly try and cover aspects of becoming a sustainable brand, right? Now, all these things which I spoke to you about, in a nutshell, if you look at it, there isn't any brand today in the Indian landscape, in the savory snacking space, which does this potentially for the top 30, 40 million households in India, right? Most brands, they are either mass brands, or they are only taste first, or they are possibly only solving for health as an aspect, or trying to be just sustainable. We are possibly trying to string together a bunch of these needs, which the top 30, 40 million households in this country have asked for, and trying to emerge as a niche brand for them.
Very interesting. Anish, I'm going to come back to you on that particular question, right? Because India is a complex market, right? And you can cut it in so many ways, right? And you still realize that you've not served that market enough, right? And there are many permutation combinations that one can apply, right? But before I come to that, right? You highlighted innovation in product, right? What I want you to particularly touch upon, is that particular aspect, right, of your product, because that is something that helps you stand out, right? And I'm sure that's part of your core communication strategy and process as well, right? So tell me a little more about the innovation in the product that you've implemented at TagZ.
So allow me to take a quick step back and walk you through a little bit of a journey and how this genesis really happened. So between the two ventures, when I was on this 18-month kind of a break, I also got the chance to kind of travel internationally a lot. And I was studying retail formats, products across the world, not just in food, but multiple other categories. But particularly within food, there was this aspect which really, really stuck out. And I realized that across the world, including the Southeast Asian part of the world, the European part of the world, the American part of the world, they were at least a decade ahead of us when it came to innovating on food technology. Somehow India has always been driven by large brands, and these large brands have focused on mass markets because that's where they've sensed the opportunity. And there has been very, very little innovation on new food products. That's a wave somehow we've just not latched onto enough, right? We've done a fantastic job of latching onto the new product development wave when it comes to software, but I think when it comes to innovating on food, we've really not done enough. So we said we will make this a core part of our whole thesis and actually invest money in developing products which have either found success elsewhere in the world or potentially focus on developing products which could be first in the world as well, right? And the reason we did that is because I think if a well-researched, innovative product is invested upon, word of mouth is something which is far stronger than for a commoditized product, for a me-too product. Right? And you need to possibly invest in marketing dollars in the longer term diminishes sensitivity, right? That is the reason because of which we said we will innovate on food technology. And food technology for us is not, the Swiggy Zomatos of the world, right? We've always ascribed food tech to Swiggy and Zomato, right? But for us, food tech is actually innovating on technology in food. right? Um, did deep research, and what we realized is the kind of audience that we were speaking to, which is the top 30, 40 million households, and a particularly younger consumer that we're targeting, there was a huge consumption bias. There was a huge preference bias for two or three product categories. Chips and wafers was number one on that, right? Extruded snacks was number two, right? Very surprisingly, traditional Indian namkeen, which is a mainstream preference for people our age, older than us, right? Didn't find that strong resonance. So what that meant very clearly to us is that the first thing that we wanted to do is give the consumer a potato chip, which they loved, right? But give them a significantly better potato chip, right? And that's when we started covering the entire landscape globally. We came across this product which is called popped potato chips, and we realized nobody's making that in India. And the unique thing about popped potato chips is uses very innovative technology. So it's a combination of high temperature, high pressure, and a lot of specialized piston-based equipment, which basically is subjected upon potato, right? And they pop into these chips. So the technology is called popping. And because there is no frying or baking or air roasting or any oil involved, all these potato chips, they have 50% less fat, no trans fat, no cholesterol, no artificial colors, preservatives, palm oil, or gluten, right? Which means essentially we were able to cut out everything which is harmful about a fried potato chip, without necessarily compromising on the taste profile, on the flavors, right? And voila, here is a potato chip, right? Which consumers across the country today are falling in love with, and it's significantly better for you as well.
Interesting, Anish. I mean, you essentially, there are two questions that come to my mind, right? I mean, first is, how you're cutting the market, right? You're talking about a 30, 40 million households, right? And that's a very, very small number when you talk about, India market. I mean, India market is a massive opportunity. I mean, anything less than 200 million, 300 million, that doesn't really cut it, right? But here you are, here you prioritize the 30, 40 million households, right? Now, is this an aware niche that you're looking at? Is there some sort of, say, a health element to it, where this becomes a priority over the other consumption? Or, how are you dissecting the market, right? I mean, when you say 30, 40 million that you were sort of targeting, right? Where does that number come
from? So classic BCG research, okay? I think, and they classify these households typically as the elite, affluent households in the country. And these are households which potentially earn upwards of 15 lakhs per annum per year, right? So that's ballpark the number in the Indian market that we're potentially looking at. Obviously, it's a very, very fast growing segment as well. This number is expected to double by 2025, of course, right? But then these are the households which have the spending power for all kinds of products that are premium, right? So hence, to begin with, we are potentially targeting these households. Because not only are these the most elite or affluent households, they're also households with maximum global exposure, with maximum affinity for global brands, with high aspiration values and needs, right? So hence, to begin with, potentially we're trying to solve for these households which reside typically in the top 15 odd urban conglomerates in India. Having said that, in the last 2 years, we've realized that there is demand for our products from every nook and cranny of the country, and consumers are surprising us. But as I said, to begin with, potentially in the next 3 to 4 years, our focus is solving for these households. But as we gain scale, as we gain momentum, as we innovate further on our product pipeline, there's nothing that stops us from potentially looking at markets beyond that as well, within India and outside of India as well.
Very interesting. I mean, I'm loving each part of this conversation, Anish, and I honestly am telling you this. Anish, another question, right, which is essentially in the same line, the subset of the question that I asked you earlier. How's the early phase of testing been, right? I mean, because India, like I said, is a fairly complex market when it comes to taste, right? So I mean, you've tried to sort of define the market at, say, at a disposable income level, at a purchase level. I'm taking a step further, right, where it's about the taste, right? And we are fairly cynical about the taste and the palate, right? And it's usually difficult, right? And what you're doing is an FMCG product, right? Which essentially means that there has to be a massive experiential play that you have to, I mean, at a communication level, you can possibly solve it once, right? But if you have to essentially ensure that there is consistency in consumption, right? And the urban consumer that you talk about is spoiled for choice, right? I mean, there are international brands that are available, again, where the narrative is essentially that of health, right? That makes it very complicated for you. What was the early phase like, right? For the brand? I mean, how did that testing thing come right? Tell me a little more about that.
Sure. So on hindsight, I think a bunch of these decisions were driven by the fact that, I'm doing this for the second time around.
Sure.
And what I wanted to stay away from right from the beginning was category creation.
Right.
Okay. Because I think category creation should be left to companies which are massively capitalized or have, very highly demonstrated expertise in a specific area.
Okay.
Sure. We said that we will possibly give the consumer what he's anyways looking for, understands really well. And, there isn't a significant decision matrix that he has to, navigate his way through to decide whether he wants to try a product or not.
Right.
Okay. And hence, possibly if you look at it, the first decision itself was to do potato chips. Right. Because it's a universally understood product category. Okay.
Right.
We decided against doing anything like, kale chips or juniper flavored, something exotic. Right. We said we will stay away from anything exotic, okay, which the consumer doesn't understand, which needs us to invest significantly on developing consumer understanding. Right. So we gave the consumer as step number one, potato chips. Okay. Sure. I'm going to be very honest. We possibly in the beginning didn't even speak much about popped potato chips. Right. We just gave them potato chips in significantly better packaged products, and at 50% less fat. We wanted to make the decision-making process for the consumer as simple as possible. Of course, now we speak about popping as a technology and how it is different because consumers have experienced our product. More than 3 lakh consumers across the country have experienced our product. In the beginning, the kind of flavors that we chose are again flavors which the consumer knows and is very familiar with. So the first 3 flavors that we launched were masala trekking, cream onion diving, and salt tripping. 70% of the potato chip market today in India is between these 3 flavors, right? We just gave marginal twists, international twists to these flavors. But then, for most of us, masala is blue, right? Cream onion is green, right? And salt is yellow. So we stuck to the same color palette. So you actually see the packs right behind me, right? So,
I see that.
We said we will give our consumers something that they're very familiar with, but add our own little twist to it. Which will only keep bringing them back, right? I think it's very important to give the consumer what he's looking for, what he's comfortable with, but add your own, flavoring or seasoning on top.
Sure.
I think that is something which gave us the initial confidence that the consumer, will love our product.
Right.
But I also have a very hidden secret sauce, and that is my co-founder. Okay. Right. My co-founder not just happens to be a IIT Powai graduate and about 7 years of experience with all kinds of startups, but he's a Marwadi from Jaipur. Okay.
Right.
So I think in a way, the whole taste bud problem is something that we've anyway solved for, because something that can pass through Sagar's taste buds will always have a very high chance of finding acceptance.
Very interesting. Anish, that brings me to the next question, right? And I think, I've talked to many food founders, right? And D2C founders as well, right? Who are kind of, building great food-focused companies, right? And I'm kind of overwhelmed and kind of flabbergasted in the way they're kind of cutting a lot of stuff, right? And solving for taste, right? And India is, like I said, it's a fairly complex economy. When it comes to our taste, differences, right? Regional taste differences, right? But one thing that was a constant across each conversation was essentially how every single founder, it was his or her narrative, right, which was a reflection of a certain, packet, for example, right? My question has been, how do you institutionalize such a process, right? How do you institutionalize such a process? Because there will come a point that you will operate in territories which are not necessarily known, and I think COVID has kind of exposed us to essentially that, right? Where people are now consuming all sorts of content, which makes it very difficult for companies to anticipate what kind of flavors are going to look for, right? So how do you institutionalize such innovation, right? And how do you do that?
So step number one, I think what we are always looking for is deep and very relevant consumer insights.
Sure.
Okay. So for example, we launched this new product called beer and barbecue, right? And it essentially came from the insight that today these top 30-40 million households that I'm talking about potentially can't deal with chakna anymore, right? If they have evolved from lager beer to brewed beer and a lot of other premium beer brands, I think they are also looking for a premium bar snack, right? And there aren't any available. with that insight is when we started working on something like beer mark, right? We realized that, the top 30-40 million households that I'm talking to you about today pay 250 rupees for a box of Pringles, which is imported from outside, right? And they pay 100 rupees for a box of Pringles, which is made in India. Okay. Right. And I think the big difference there is basically in the flavor profile. These are consumers who are looking for international flavors like, ranch, right? Keeping that insight in mind, we are launching products like, Italian cheese and herbs, right? We are launching, our range of dips, such as harissa and sriracha, because we realize that this is a consumer who's looking for a lot of international taste experiences as well, and attributes premiumness not just to the base product, but the flavor profile that he has access to. So I think at level number one, how we institutionalize this is we spend a lot of time talking to consumers and actually understanding what their needs are. Okay. In terms of, their taste preferences and consumption occasions. At the back end, I think at all points in time, what we have an engine running is a small team which is constantly experimenting, not just with flavors, but with a lot of new products as well. Right. And trying to figure out how we can potentially make, these products better for you, add a fitness angle to it, without necessarily compromising on the taste profile. And one thing that we do, which is very different from any other large brand, is that we don't believe in a lot of research, right? We design our supply chain in such a way that, we put out the product to the consumer as soon as possible. Okay, let the consumer tell us whether he liked the product or not. If he likes it, we continue with it. If he doesn't, we just drop it, right? I think that's the best way to possibly experiment rapidly, take products to market, and keep iterating. And that's where, as a D2C brand, we are able to do that a lot faster. In fact, the way we're thinking about it is on the supply chain aspect, right? So we launched in pillow pouches. You see a lot of pillow pouches behind me. Now, of course, they add to the plastic footprint. We are a plastic neutral brand though, but we've come up with these canister bags. Okay, because not only are these reusable, but from a supply chain aspect, it makes it very easy for us to print labels and put this product out in the market. With pillow pouches, we have to make investments where we know that we will be able to sell at least 6 lakh units, right? Which ends up putting a lot of pressure on your back-end research before you decide. But with something like this, we are saying, we can potentially be the Zara of this space, where we can, possibly churn out new flavors every month.
Very interesting. Yeah. I like it. And my sense is that also reduces a lot of wastage, right? Because they're far more durable than typically the pouches, right? I think facing again, logistics becomes so much more easier, right? And I think those are some very, very large challenges when you talk about, creating a D2C brand, especially in the food space, right? And the kind of space that you're in. Anish, I would want you to pick up. I would want to understand the testing process, right? I mean, you highlighted essentially what you're doing, right? How the research team is kind of researching, what's happening, what's not happening. There are certain trends and stuff like that, right? But you eventually have to take the product to the consumer, right? In a certain small way, right? What is that process like? I was talking to somebody recently, right? And they said that, they have this huge consumer base that they've built, right? And they pick and choose from certain people, right? People who've been trying it once, people who've tried their product twice, people who are now become part of the ecosystem, right? And there's a significant relationship that is established. And they say that, the process of testing is that, we randomly pick and choose, say, 20, 30, 40 people, right? Depending on, on their regional existence. They understand them at a cultural level as well, where these people come from. And then they sort of, when they are kind of ideating, they bring that product to them, and then they taste, and then they register. And then they, from there, kind of take it forward, and then, put it at an industrial level, right? From a production standpoint, right? What is the process in your case, right? I mean, this is something which is a snack, right? And how, so what is that testing process for you, right? I mean, how do you get to a point saying that, look, this is something that we have to sort of go with? Also, the fact that, there is, like you said, right? I mean, 600,000 units is what you have to do in case you're doing a pillar pouches. That puts a huge pressure on you, right? From taking that call. What is that testing process like? I mean, how do you get to a point saying that, 7% is there, 8% is there? Can we do this? How long is that that process, right? From identifying an opportunity to getting it to the market, right? Tell me a little more about that.
Sure. So I think one of the things that we've tried to do is not get into making products which are radically different from the products that we are already doing.
Right.
Okay? So that in itself possibly enables that the turnaround time is a lot shorter. Okay, for us to create a variant, right? And also the cost of failure is a lot less. Okay, so at this point in time, where we are selling close to about 2.5 lakh units a month, we are saying that we want to stick to our core as much as possible, because I think there's a large market opportunity to be exploited.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So most of our experimentation at this point in time is with products which are fairly similar to the kind of products that we're making.
Very interesting.
So we don't go into radically different products. Okay. When we chose to do popped potato chips, we said that we will do popped potato chips because this has found adequate acceptance in US, Europe, and Southeast Asia as well.
Right.
There isn't a radical reason why it should not find acceptance here.
Sure.
Okay. With some of our new products as well, we are following the same thesis,
right,
that we are borrowing as much as possible, Indianizing it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the moment this has been solved for, basically we are always innovating for tastes, for flavors, for seasoning, right?
Sure.
And the best way of doing that is, I think, we've been very, very fortunate to have a lot of early consumers who stay very, very loyal to the process. And we look at them as co-creators, right? So all our products typically go through an early access program, okay? Mm-hmm. And we have a co-creator base of anywhere around 250 to 300 odd consumers, right? Who always get early access to some of our products, right? And these are people from diverse age brackets, diverse geographical lineages, and very different professional backgrounds and lifestyle preferences, right? So as long as, we get a thumbs up from more than 60-70% of these people, right? We said we're just going ahead with it, right? Without necessarily, a lot of mental, mechanization around it,
right.
Which is good.
No, I like the way I like the way you're cutting it, right? And I think I like the way you're kind of talking about it, and I understand where you're coming from, and I think early stage brand, it's a reflection of how you're thinking about it, right?
I think the biggest currency as a startup that you have is time, right? And
absolutely, and I think also the fact that, on a lot of occasions, you tend to get carried away, right? Which I think in your case is not the case, right? I think it's extremely maturely you kind of dealing with the situation where you're saying that, listen, this is something that we can do and this is something that we can't do, and we, of course, there's a pressure as a company on you to go out and create many options, right? And I think that's essentially what your consumer is also looking for. Thus it becomes important to stick to the core, which is essentially 70-80% of what you're already doing, and just about adding that additional layer, right? And I think that just reduces everything and gets you to economies of scale much faster, right? And I think that's a great way and a very mature way of doing it. And that, I think, is also the advantage of being a second-time entrepreneur, right? I think you can prioritize well. You're not necessarily swayed by a lot of trends that are there. Anish, I would love to talk to you more about the supply chain, right? Because that's something which is extremely challenging when you talk of India kind of market, right? We're connected to certain areas, we're not connected to certain areas. Of course, quality of output again is very important. The feed that goes in, right? I think post production distribution, I think again is a huge challenge, and I would love to talk to you more about that. But before I do that, right, what are the current numbers like? I mean, how large is the SKU bucket right now? What are the flavors that you are available in? And what are the number of orders you're doing, or customers that you're serving uniquely on a month-on-month basis?
Sure. So before I speak about that, I'll quickly delve upon what I'm inspired by, and that will possibly give you a sense of the direction
Absolutely.
where we are headed.
Right.
I think there's this brand that I really, really look up to, and the brand is called Red Bull. Okay. Mm-hmm. Technically speaking, it's a one SKU product. Right. I'm not going to speak about the global numbers here, but in India, it's a 400 crore revenue company. Right. Wow. I believe that to build a viable business in the food and beverage space, you need not necessarily go down the path of constantly throwing new products at the consumer.
Sure.
Okay. I think it's about really, really being able to identify what the consumer is looking for and trying to solve for that with, doable product lineup, right? Keeps your supply chain simple. Okay. Economies of scale are easier to build. Right. And potentially you are in a much better position to pass on a better value equation to the consumer at the end of the day.
Right.
So that's the direction that we are trying to take. We're trying to build a brand which is not just known for our products or our range of products, but then the fact that we do few things, but then we do them really well, and we build a brand image around it, okay, which the consumer can resonate with, right? Sure. So what we focus on, possibly a lot more than our product innovation at all points in time, what we're focusing on is how can we get the consumer, to talk about our brand vectors, which is travel, music, sports, and outdoors. So just the way, let's say, Red Bull is synonymous with adventure sport for all of us, right? We want to become that brand which promotes to people to pursue their passion around travel, music, sports, and outdoors, right? And encourage them to lead an active lifestyle.
Sure.
Right. Having said that, and that's the direction where we are going. I think we've made fantastic progress. We launched just a month before COVID, and that was February, exactly 30 days before COVID hit us. But I think that has only made us that much more resilient as a company, right? Currently, we have a lineup of about 5 flavors, right? Which are basically masala, salt, cream. And 2 new flavors called beer and barbecue and Italian cheese and herbs. These are available in pillow pouches priced at 50 to 60 bucks. And there are 2 other flavors which also operate at a 20 rupee price point, right? We very recently launched these canister packs in all our 5 flavors. And these are typically priced at about 80 bucks per canister. These are canisters that are reusable and can find various other uses in your household. We've launched a range of dips, right? International gourmet dips. This is something only to increase the engagement with the consumer and actually give him a well-rounded experience. Because if you notice the way we've designed our chips, we've actually given them a slightly, spherical surface so that it's very easy to consume it with dips, right? So that's the range in the lineup. Over the next 6 months, you'll possibly see us coming up with at least 3 to 4 new flavors. On dips as well as on the chip side. But the innovation pipeline is also walking into a bunch of new product areas. Currently, we sell anywhere around 2.5 lakh units a month. I don't know, the consumer count would be difficult to do because we also sell offline. About 60% of our business is online and D2C centric. About 40% of our business is offline. We sell in premium stores. We sell in a lot of pubs, cafes, quick serve restaurants on the table. Where consumers typically order their beer, ends up on the table in 5 minutes, and they also have the fittest potato chips tags sitting right there that they can just open up and possibly ignore the French fries and the fried nachos and the masala poppers and peanuts, right? A much fitter choice to make.
Interesting. Anish, how I want to sort of talk to you. I mean, I think I have this huge liking for very freshly done hummus, right? And of course, I would have loved to talk to you more about the dips particularly business, right? And I think that's kind of exploding as far as the India scene is concerned, right? I've had the opportunity of knowing many founders who are actually solving for that, right? And I personally feel I think you're kind of graduated, right? But I think a very interesting point that you highlighted, right, is essentially that you have to have a limited SKU bucket, a tightly packed SKU bucket, right? Which is okay, and there are 2 ways to look at it, right? One is that you kind of solve for only one problem, and the company that you highlighted, right, which is doing 400 crores worth of business in India, and then of course having a slightly more diversified portfolio, right? Now my sense is, and I think possibly I would love you to answer it, right? Is that in a post-COVID environment, right? I mean, you could have solved with a single product in a market which was not necessarily as connected as agile, right? Today, the market that we're operating in is a very different market, right? I mean, we're talking about a very different kind of a resonance. It's a very dynamic market. The audience today, the consumer today, is exposed to a lot of content, right? I mean, this is a very classical question that I've been asking to each founder, right? The information arbitrage that existed, right, between say a market A and a market B is kind of reduced drastically, right? I think Gen Z is now kind of consuming a lot of international content, right? They're also the drivers of consumption, specifically in the segment that you are kind of targeting, right? Do you think you can actually solve with a small bucket, SKU bucket, right? Or do you think companies will have to innovate fast? I mean, I think the way you are talking about it is that you're already tuned to kind of innovate fast, right? But do you think having a smaller bucket as a founder, right? And I know it's a difficult question. It's not a straight answer that you can have with it. But do you think it's better to solve for a smaller play rather than very quickly innovating, having an understanding that consumer preference is not going to last for very long, and quickly change the product profile? Which is the thesis that you would go with, when you are solving for the Indian consumer, the new Indian consumer?
So Ashu, I feel the answer to this question really depends on what is it that you're looking to build in the longer term. Okay, and hence you tune your core competencies accordingly. Okay, so I think if the aim is to become a 1,000 crore company, okay, then obviously it makes sense to potentially focus on doing mass products. Okay, that might require you to have a huge range of products at very massy price points, and then distribution becomes your focus. Okay.
Right.
If you're looking to be a 500 crore company, okay, with a double-digit, EBITDA figure in mind,
Sure.
in that case, I think the answer lies in not necessarily doing such a large portfolio of products,
Right.
but a medium range, portfolio of products.
Right.
But own specific channels and own the consumer to an extent, right? However, if somebody like us, okay, and I'm going to talk only with the next 3 years in perspective, because the world changes very fast, right? I think in the next 3 to 4 years, what we are aiming to do is essentially hit 100 crore kind of a mark. Okay,
Right.
We are not being overly ambitious or aggressive in terms of the numbers that we want to build, because we are trying to build the company with a certain financial prudence in mind, right? It's not just growth that we are chasing for, but then we are trying to build a sustainable business here. I think in that context, it is not such a high prerogative for us to constantly do a lot of new products, okay,
Right.
or have a very large portfolio at any given point in time. So I think the way we are approaching this is that, at any given point in time, we don't want to be doing, let's say, more than 20 to 25 SKUs, okay, even to get to this 100 crore kind of a scale, right?
Right.
Now those 25 SKUs could keep changing, okay, but then the advantages of staying limited to those number of SKUs are far beyond just the consumer behavior. Now, for example, when COVID hit us, thankfully our production didn't get impacted as much, simply because our manufacturing is so lean and so streamlined, right? The back end works like clockwork. We are not dependent on a lot of different kinds of raw materials, right? Our manufacturing unit does not require lots of different kinds of ingredients and inputs, and hence it's easy for us to run the supply chain. When we're not doing a lot of products, okay, our inventory holding is very lean. Okay, very rarely does our inventory cycle cross more than 20 to 12 days in a month. So it's a lot easier to run a nimble operation.
Right.
I think we are focused on building a very nimble operation, get to this 100 crore mark. And for that, I think sticking to a 25 SKU goal is something which makes sense for us. But having said that, this bouquet of 25 SKUs might actually keep changing. And thanks to our nimbleness, we'll actually be able to do that.
I think, Anish, one thing which is going to be clearly highlighted, as this recording goes out, as the session, and our conversation goes out, right, is going to be the complexity that a founder in the D2C food tech, in the food space has to go through, right? And I'm in my, when you're telling me that, right, in my mind, I am just I'm trying to build a picture, right? I'm just trying to build a flowchart of many decisions that you have to sort of go through, and I can only sort of empathize, right, with the challenges that you go on a day-to-day basis, right? Anish, I'm going to talk to you more about supply chain, right? And I think supply chain is an extremely challenging piece when we talk in India, right? Tell me a little more about it, right? I mean, how have you standardized it, right? Is this a distributed manufacturing process that you have, or you have one single manufacturer who's essentially taking care of pretty much all of your requirements currently? How will it look like, as you go forward, right? I think because it's an important piece to understand. You typically want to be closer to the market, right? So essentially, when you see many companies within the FMCG space, right, and the food space, right, is essentially they have distributed manufacturing partners, right? One for north, one for east, one for west, one for south, right? And they build within that, right? So how is that for you currently, right? How are you sort of managing your supply chain on the ingredient side and on the delivery side?
Sure. So I'll quickly speak about the back end part of it first.
Sure.
Okay. All our ingredient suppliers, and this is something that we're intensely proud of now.
Sure.
Ashu, we are 100% made in India product.
Wow. Okay. Congratulations.
We are 100% made in India product.
Right.
We were possibly pushed in this direction to a large extent because of COVID as well, because every time we would have to wait to get our products cleared at customs. Right. During the COVID crisis, just made us do everything else in India, right? So maybe our plans got accelerated because of COVID, right? So deeply and intensely proud of the fact that we do whatever we do 100% in India. And we've brought this technology to India. We're the first brand to do this. Even today, we are the only brand to make this product 100% in India. Nobody else does that.
Okay.
So our seasoning comes from various different kinds of seasoning houses, right? The product, the way it is made is we first have to extrude potato micro pellets, and not too many people understand how to make potato micro pellets. It needs specialized dyes. Okay. We make these potato micro pellets as well in India. This is out of a factory which is based in Jaipur.
Right.
we have two finished product factories, which are one is in Maharashtra and the other one is in Karnataka.
Right.
And again, I think you hit the nail on the head. In this line of business, it is very important to be close to the consumer, close to the market, because logistics and shipping cost is a huge cost in this line of business. So there are so many times I come across consumers who are like, you're selling chips at $50, right? I'm sure this doesn't even cost you $5 to make, right? But maybe something that a lot of consumers don't understand, and with them when they don't understand, that the costs in this line of business are possibly a lot more to do with the whole logistics, the supply chain, the distribution chain elements, right? And hence it makes sense to be closer to markets. Given the fact that from an offline perspective, our focus has been more towards the southern and the western part of the country. These are the two places where we have factories. Having said that, because the product found acceptance, we also have distributors in the north now who came and approached us, and they buy products from us. We ship it to them from our factory in Maharashtra. But I think the day is not very far when we'll possibly need to have another unit out of the northern part of the country as well. Right. So basically, the offline supplies happen from these factories. Online, of course, we have again segregated warehouses. We have warehouses in the north, in the south, and in the west, from where shipments typically go out to consumers directly. We work with a lot of e-commerce platforms, and we need to supply to their warehouses in various cities. That's again something which is taken care of by most of our distributors. I think the unique challenge in this space is distribution. Okay, and I think that is where a lot of early stage brands, struggle. And before getting into the space, I would have possibly met anywhere around 70, 75 founders, who were already in this space, and I could very clearly see that there were very clear cohorts. Okay, there were possibly 5 companies who were doing more than 5 crores a month. There were possibly 10 companies doing more than 1 crore a month, and then there was a huge long tail, which was basically brands doing anywhere between a 25 lakh to a 50 lakh. Okay, and they would typically stagnate at that scale for a very long period of time, simply because either these were brands which were online only, or they were offline only. Okay. I think the challenge with being online only is that at the end of the day, somewhere, the online market is also a limited market. And unless you have deep marketing budgets to set aside, promoting and spending online isn't, everybody's, cup of tea. Offline distribution is not something which everybody understands. Thankfully, I've spent 15 years doing offline distribution, playing to my strengths there. And, we've been able to build a distribution network of about 24, 26 distributors already across the country, who've really helped us, substantially in taking our products to the right stores. And online, we work, as I said, with most of these partners. I think in the snacking space particularly, I'm not referring to the food and beverage space as one unit. In the snacking space, it's important to have an online as well as an offline presence, because snacking at the end of the day is a fairly impulse-driven purchase. It's not such a planned purchase, right? So if I'm going to be possibly buying, specialty sauce, for example, that's a planned purchase, because I know I'm going to be making pasta, right? And I want to order for it, and you plan for it and buy. But I'm in a very impulse-driven category, so I also need to have a offline presence at the right consumption locations.
But listen, that makes it extremely cumbersome, right? I mean, as soon as you enter that territory of being or choosing to be present offline, right, that essentially means that there is a huge working capital requirement that you'll have to have, right? I mean, you'll have to factor in wastage as well, right? Because that's a very, very large challenge for some of the largest companies that are out there, right? When you talk to founders, right? I mean, and who are essentially operating in the D2C space, right? Is essentially for a variety of reasons, right? One is, of course, they want to engage with the customer directly. Second, they just want to cut down on all the costs that are going to get built into, when you get into a traditional distribution, right?
Absolutely.
And I understand where you're coming from, right? That you have to be out there. Unless you make yourself visible, people will not. I mean, you need to build that continuity, right? From, say, a physical visibility to a digital consumption. And that's just so much more important, right? But that comes with its own challenges. I mean, how do you solve for that?
So think about it this way, okay? And it's not actually that complex at the end of the day. I think clarity of thought is very important. So visualize TagZ at a scale where we're doing, let's say, 6 crores a month. Okay. The way I see it, 60% of our business is going to be online, which is, let's say, about 3.6 crores. Okay. 40% of my business is going to be offline, which is about 2.4 crores. Okay.
Right.
So let me not speak about the 3.6 crores here at all, right?
Sure.
Let me just focus on this 2.4 crores. So for me to be able to hit this 2.4 crores, I possibly need to have an offline presence of only 20,000 points of sale spread out across the top, let us say 12 to 15 cities, right?
Sure.
Which is ballpark about a 1,500 stores, even in a large city like, let's say, Delhi or Bombay, right? So what we're talking about is going only to the premium stores, which we know will have high throughput and can give us more than 60 packs per month per store, which is about 2 packs per day.
Right.
Right. We are not attempting to be the Lays of this space at all, right? We are very clear that, again, the analogy is Red Bull. Let's use Pringles as an example here, right? We are saying we want to go into 20,000 stores across the country, which can on an average give me about 60 packs per month per store, which is about 2 packs per day. Fairly doable, right? Just to set some context here. So today, for example, we are in about 650 stores in Bangalore. Okay, a mass brand like Lay's would possibly be in 55,000 stores. Right, that's the difference in scale, right? And we want to retain that. We want to be a limited distribution brand because our aspiration is to be a premium brand. Okay.
Very interesting.
Now, you spoke about working capital and wastages. Okay. I think there are solves for that as well. If your product is good, right, you will always find distributors who want to work with you on cash and carry basis, right? They will invest in the brand. Okay. And they will not necessarily, increase their exposure in terms of working capital. Wastages. Okay. So today, if you look at any other packet snack, company, they typically operate at about 3.1 to 3.2%, which is their, returns which come back because of damages, air outs or expiry, right? But, we solved for that. We invested in far superior packaging. Instead of going for 60, 70 micron thickness packaging, we actually went for 120 micron thickness packaging, which is 3-layer packaging, which keeps the product fresh for a longer period of time, but more importantly, reduces damages, because you will never see a TagZ pack on the shelf with air leakage, right? And hence my returns from the market are a lot lesser. And we operated about 0.61% in the last 2 years, right? So I think if you go down deeply, think about the product, okay? Think about what your strengths are, focus on them. There is a solution available. So offline is not the beast that most people make it out to be. There are ways of hacking your growth into this space as well.
Anish, I think this is going to be a good tutorial for many, many people who aspire to set up D2C brands, right? And I think that also brings me to my next question, right? I mean, I think and I think you have clearly, you've given out the logic in terms of doing physical, right? And I believe in that. I think physical is very important. I think Indian consumer, I mean, irrespective of whatever we get to, right? I think we'll still need touch and feel, and I think you're putting lesser pressure on that, the physical, your expectations from the physical ecosystem, right? And I like the fact, the way that you are kind of looking at the distributors, right? And I very firmly believe having a strong distribution layer, people who can be stakeholders in your growth process, is absolutely phenomenal, right? I think you're cutting your risk substantially, right? And I think in your case, you're clearly doing that, right? Anish, that also brings me to my next question, right? A large part of your sales is coming from a direct environment, right? Which is essentially, say, e-commerce stores and so on and so forth, right? Now, when
from a website.
Yeah, and from your website. So, and this is a question which is more towards website, right? Is that when you talk to D2C, many D2C brands, right? Is essentially where they want to build a direct connect with the consumer, right? And want to have a lesser dependence on say marketplaces, right? Because of course marketplaces come with their own costs, right? There are challenges there. You have to build inventory, so on and so forth. Right? It's a very different kind of competition. And that is in an environment where you are, right? For example, where the price of the product is say 70, 80 bucks, or 90 bucks a piece, right? It just becomes difficult, right, for a consumer to go in that environment and pick it up and buy, right? I mean, how are you solving for that? I mean, is there a different kind of relationship that you're trying to establish, right? Through say certain other engagements that you talk about. I mean, how is that relationship playing out? I mean, is there a subscription model to it? How are you ensuring that there is a consistency in them coming onto your website and purchasing from there? How are you solving for that?
So again, I think here our understanding of the consumer's behavior helps us significantly.
Okay.
We very clearly understand that the consumer who's buying from an e-commerce platform is potentially very different from the consumer who's buying our product from our website. Okay. Somebody who's buying this from a big basket, Amazon, Amazon Pantry, or possibly buying it on Grofers or Super Daily, right? All these platforms that we're present right now are possibly consumers who are doing this as a basket purchase, okay? who possibly come onto a Amazon pantry or big basket to buy a lot of the regular groceries, and along with that, they're possibly picking up a pack of chips, which is significantly fitter, right? These are people who are possibly motivated by speed of delivery, right? These are people who are possibly motivated by what kind of offer am I getting on a specific platform. And these are people who buy products at a certain pre-described frequency. Okay. This behavior is possibly very, very different, right? From somebody who's buying it on Swiggy, for example, right? Swiggy Instamart, which is one of our larger partners, right? Sure. These are consumers who are possibly buying it because they possibly have sat down for a drinking session or having a party at home, and they want a pack of chips delivered to them in the next 30 minutes, right? So if you look at it, the motivation of the consumer in both these two cases is very, very different, right? The third segment is the set of consumers who are coming to our website and buying, okay? Right. These are possibly consumers who are looking for our product because of the brand image that the product stands for. But more importantly, maybe they're buying a product because they don't find gluten-free chips anywhere else. Maybe they don't find palm oil-free chips anywhere else, right? Maybe because they were looking specifically for a potato chip which doesn't have artificial colors, or preservatives or flavors, right? So I think the motivation that the consumer has for each of these buying occasions is very, very different. Important to understand that, and hence kind of deliver them the kind of propositions they're looking for. Right. So very consciously, for example, on the Swiggies of the world, or possibly big baskets of the world, we go to them with a SKU size which is relatively more affordable, can fit into their basket size, and fast delivery is the motivation, right? Whereas possibly on a website, we sell relatively larger packs, okay? Because we know that the consumer is possibly looking at buying a product for a very, very specific reason, and the level of conviction and loyalty is far higher, right? And of course, the kind of offers that we will curate on a website will also be very different. Subscription offers and those kind of things come along. The ability to curate your own collection comes along. So those kind of playbooks fall in place.
Very interesting. Anish, we're towards the end of the conversation, right? And I think no conversation can kind of end without talking about COVID, right? A lot of planning that you did was essentially in a pre-COVID environment, right? I think a lot of conversations that essentially happened in a pre-COVID environment, right? But when you actually sort of, the thickness in your operations came during the COVID period, right? While of course, there was a phase, when people were kind of excited, about the possibility of, trying new things and so on and so forth, right? I think it's now we kind of shifted into a very different zone, right? A far more complex zone, right? And something that I highlighted to earlier as well, right, is that informational arbitrage is kind of produced, right? Now that is putting a lot of pressure on many larger organizations and startups as well, right? Because now the consumer is not going to be in a very definable territory, right? The influence can literally come from whichever market, right? Because it's very content driven now, right? How does that change your thought process, right? And it's actually more personal. It's more focused on the leadership style, right? Because here you are now going to be operating in extremely dynamic times where the product life cycles are going to be much shorter. You'll not have the kind of the time, right, to kind of go out and course correct, right? You'll have to get it right at a research level within your organization, then going out and experimenting in the market, right? I think that's that, right? You'll have to go out with new products. You'll have to kind of cut down on those products in case they're not performing. You'll have to come up with new versions and so forth, right? And I understand where you're coming from, but from a thesis standpoint, you're kind of optimizing for many things, right? You're trying to have little variances and not really come up with the newer pieces, right? But from a leadership standpoint, how does that change your thinking and thought process?
So I think before I speak about products here, I'll speak about people, and I think that ends up making a big difference. And I think, by the way, I've seen this pattern, Ashu, across a lot of companies which were launched just before COVID, just after COVID. Okay, I think the degree of resilience in these founders and in these companies is just of a very different level, because possibly the lessons in frugality that we've had to learn are far make or break kind of situation.
Right.
So in that context, I'm intensely excited about the fact that the early seeds of the company was sown at a stage where we understand frugality and not being adventurous that much more, right? Uh, one of the most important things that we've done, and that my thought process has only gotten reinforced, is that I'm possibly looking to build a team, build a company with a very lean team, right? Like one of the personal side challenges that I'm trying to pursue is that can a 100 crore company be built with just 100 people, right? And I believe it's doable, right? I think we were able to tide through, two waves of COVID because of the lean team that we had, right? This is a hyper motivated team, right, which is married to the vision of the company, which is married to the outcomes of the company, and it is very easy for us to navigate, and keep changing course, right, because of the sheer team size. Maybe very early on in my professional career, I learned this lesson when I worked with this beautiful company called Nokia. 35,000 crores in India with just 120 people, right? I think the nimbleness with which the business was built was fantastic. We're trying to replicate something similar here. So the first thing from a leadership standpoint, which has changed for me personally, is that I'm that much more clear that we're looking to be a very lean and a very small team, right? To be able to navigate through any eventuality at any given point. Okay. I think the same has gotten translated into our product philosophy as well. We believe that the India market, we believe that the exports market is large enough to whet our appetite of 100 crores that we're looking to build in the next 4 years. Okay. It's not necessarily a very, very large number that we're trying to chase. Okay. I think we're being realistic in terms of what we want to go out and achieve. And we believe with the kind of product bouquet that we have, and the one that we're working on doesn't require us to be very adventurous. We're going to stick to a certain playbook. Okay. In cricket terminology, maybe we are happy taking singles and doubles, right? Keeping the ball kind of grounded, and delivering predictable results for everyone, for every stakeholder in the company. Okay. Consumer behavior is changing. Okay. It is changing very, very rapidly. I think even when today people have the choice of going out, they're preferring to do things indoors. Okay. I think the kind of passions that they're choosing to pursue also has changed significantly. I think the life goals that the consumer is possibly chasing has also changed. Keeping all of those things in mind, I think we need to offer to the consumer what they are looking for as well, right? And hence our messaging continues to stay very clearly around our mission, which is that we want to help our consumers not just eat fitter, but also lead a more active lifestyle. Okay. And we want to keep it simple. We want to keep it at that, right? Without necessarily trying to aim for the sky, sun, and the moon. I think I've lost my enchantment for what was that curve called? The hockey stick curve. Okay. I feel the hockey stick curve is a little mythical. And of course, I think that's why unicorns and hockey sticks curves go together, right? Because both are mythical at the end of the day. We're trying to build a realistic, a sustainable, a strong business which can deliver the product promise to the consumers who are choosing to believe in this.
Fantastic, Anish. My last question, right, in this conversation, right, is what are the next 2 years like, right? I think it's a cliched question in many ways, but what are the next 2 years like, right? And I think more importantly, are we going to see more presence or a significant presence in Bharat, right? Because that's an upcoming territory, right? I think that's part of every conversation. I think each founder operating in India is extremely excited about it, right? Because like we kind of spoke, right? Urban market consumer is essentially overwhelmed with choice, right? Bharat is still new; it's fresh. There is no benchmark. There is no baggage, right? And it's kind of daring and glaring to consume, right? Is that a market that is part of the priority list, right? So would love to hear your thoughts, right? Are we going to see tags in the Kanpurs of the world and the Bhopals of the world and Indores of the world and many such tier 2 and downward areas that are now going to be part of the the consumption, the larger consumption play that we've been talking about in the country? Are we going to see there the product?
So I think let me clarify the definition of Bharat the way we are looking at it. Okay.
Sure.
By the way, Ashu, we are already in the Bhopals, Indores of the world and the Hublis of the world. Okay.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, we are already in the Madurais of the world.
Uh-huh.
And what we're very, very clearly seeing, okay, is that aspiration levels, thanks to the consumption of content on internet, is
Right.
percolating far deeper than what you and I sitting in the metros possibly even
Yeah.
think or believe.
Right.
We realize that the need or the want for our products
Right.
are far higher than what we even anticipated it to be, right?
Mhm.
Allow me to give you a very microscopic example here. Okay, there's
Sure.
a chain of store called V-Mart, okay, which
Right.
basically operates in a very small town called Siddipet, which
Mhm.
is potentially about 80 kilometers away from Hyderabad. Okay,
Right.
a large mega store, okay, where you will possibly not just find TagZ, but a lot of other brands like Paperboat,
Right.
Pressery, which typically you associate premiumness with, and
Sure.
the consumption coming out of this store is just fantastic, right? You just need to tune your product offering to an extent, right?
Right.
Keeping that in mind, as I said, we've also chosen to climb down the price ladder and offer consumers something at a 20 rupee price point. Obviously, the margin profile of these products are not the same as our larger packs, and we're
Right.
fully aware of that, right? But having said that, there are two things that this solves for us. Number one, it possibly accelerates our mission of impacting the eat fitter mission for many more people, right?
Right.
It induces trials at a lower price point,
Mhm.
right? Potentially, which will upgrade over a period of time into larger pack sizes, right? So we are bullish about Bharat as an opportunity, but then Bharat as an opportunity for us is potentially towns and cities with a population upwards of 10 lakhs. Okay.
Right.
Which means we believe that there is consumption sitting out there for us in Hubli, in Madurai, in Amritsar, in Ludhiana, and we are in all these towns and villages already. Not
Right.
villages, actually. We are already in these towns, right?
Right.
We get retailers who order directly from us from Dimapur, from Aizawl. My geography is not that great. A remote village in Assam recently placed an order with us, a retailer who wanted to stock our products, right?
Right.
I think aspiration is just booming. Aspiration is just shooting through the
Yeah.
roof. I think if we are able to deliver the right products at the right price points with the right brand imagery, the opportunity is immense. I think we've just about started, on that road. The next 2 years might just end up seeing tags in places where we had not originally envisioned, right? So while maybe our core focus will stay focused on the top 15 towns and cities, but we believe we are in a product category where the product ends up finding its own ways,
Very interesting.
knowingly or unknowingly. We are damn excited about that opportunity, and I think going international is a very distinct opportunity as well. We're getting a lot of export orders, a lot of export
Right.
inquiries. We're seeing international preference for a product like this, and that's something which is personally very important for me, because I think somewhere coming from Bhopal, one of the deep burning passions is to be able to build an international premium brand which can come out of India, right?
Right.
So I think that's an exciting part of the journey.
Anish, what is exciting, you mentioned of Bhopal, right? What is exciting is I was in a very, very interesting conversation of, Abhishek, who's the founder of Good Dot, right? Which is a plant-based meat company, right? And to my surprise, they are operating out of Udaipur, right? And who would have thought, right? I mean, Udaipur typically is known for the beautiful lakes it has, right? Who could have
Yeah.
thought that there's a company which is, chasing a very large market in India could come out of Udaipur, right? But uh, I think those are the next cities that are coming up, right? And there are founders who are coming up from those cities, right? Who have clearly India aspirations as well as international aspirations, right? Just to add to what you said, right? No, but I think, Anish, this was an absolutely phenomenal conversation. I mean, thank you so much. I think you took me through many aspects which are very difficult, right? As part of a conversation, right? It's not usually a founder is very comfortable talking about them, but I think this was an extremely honest conversation in that sense. I think thank you for putting it out. Thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. My sense is, I think many people who are doing it currently are going to will possibly get food for thought. And I think many people who aspire to set up brands, I think this will serve as a if not a playbook, but at least a guide, right, to help prioritize, right, which is extremely important, right, in a in a complicated and a complex market like India. Anish, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining in.
Always a pleasure chatting. Happy. Thanks.
Thanks.